When the mob devoured dragons, the Night Kings became kindling. Imagine a scenario so catastrophic, so absolutely earth-shattering, that it fundamentally changed how Westeros viewed the godlike creatures that had dominated their skies for generations. The storming of the Dragon Pit was not just a riot. It was a revolution written in dragon blood and human fury, where Joffrey Velaryon met his end and the mighty Syrax, Queen Rhaenyra's beloved dragon, was torn apart by an enraged mob that decided gods could bleed after all. Welcome to Westeros' throne, where we are breaking down the night that changed everything and proved that even dragons can fall when the people have finally had enough. If you love watching power structures crumble and witnessing the moments that define entire eras, hit that subscribe button like a blacksmith hammering Valyrian steel and smash that notification bell, because we are delivering content more intense than wildfire igniting in confined spaces, and you absolutely do not want to miss what is coming next. Let us set the stage for this absolute nightmare scenario, because the storming of the Dragon Pit did not happen in a vacuum. This was the culmination of years of frustration, months of starvation, and weeks of watching the nobility tear the realm apart with their dragons, while common people paid the price in blood and empty stomachs. King's Landing during the Dance of the Dragons was a powder keg soaked in dragon fuel, just waiting for someone to light the match. And that match came in the form of a charismatic mob leader known as the Shepherd, a religious fanatic who preached that dragons were demons and the Targaryens were sinners who had brought divine punishment upon the realm. The small folk of King's Landing had watched dragon fight dragon in the skies above their city. They had seen the devastation these creatures could cause, witnessed entire neighborhoods turn to ash in seconds, and buried family members killed as collateral damage in a war between silver-haired aristocrats fighting over a chair made of swords. The mystique of dragons, that awe-inspiring terror that had kept the Targaryen dynasty secure for over a century, was evaporating faster than morning dew under dragon flame. Fear was transforming into rage, and rage in sufficient quantities becomes revolution. Joffrey Velaryon, also known as Joffrey Targaryen due to his mother Rhaenyra's marriage politics creating a confusing tangle of names and loyalties, was young, brave, and catastrophically naive about the danger he was riding into. This kid, barely in his teens, was Queen Rhaenyra's son and possessed all the confidence that comes from royal birth combined with the terrible judgment that comes from youth and inexperience. When news reached the Red Keep that a massive mob was descending upon the Dragon Pit with torches and weapons and murder in their hearts, Joffrey made a decision that would have made his mother scream in horror if she had known about it in time to stop him. He decided to mount a dragon and fly to save the others trapped in the Dragon Pit. It was a noble gesture, the kind of heroic impulse that gets songs written about you, except in this case, the song would be a tragedy. Joffrey climbed onto Syrax, his mother's own dragon, a beautiful golden beast who had carried Rhaenyra for years and represented the queen's personal power. Syrax was not used to combat, not trained for war like Caraxes or Vhagar, and was about to face something no dragon training could prepare for: thousands of humans who had lost their fear. The flight to the Dragon Pit must have seemed straightforward in Joffrey's mind. Swoop in, intimidate the mob with dragon presence, rescue the chained dragons, and return a hero. What actually happened was a masterclass in how quickly things can go catastrophically wrong when you underestimate human desperation and overestimate dragon invincibility. As Syrax approached the Dragon Pit, the mob did not scatter in terror as dragons had trained humans to do for generations. Instead, they attacked. The scene was absolute chaos, the kind of nightmare that makes you question whether humanity deserves to survive as a species. Thousands of small folk, armed with everything from butcher knives to farming tools to sharpened sticks, swarmed the Dragon Pit like ants overwhelming a much larger insect. They had numbers, they had rage, and, critically, they had lost their survival instinct that normally keeps humans from charging directly at fire-breathing death machines. The Shepherd had convinced them that the gods would protect the righteous, and whether through divine intervention or simple statistical probability, when you throw enough bodies at a problem, they were proving him right. Joffrey Velaryon's death was brutal and quick. Some accounts say he fell from Syrax during the chaos. Others suggest he was thrown when the dragon panicked. Either way, the young prince hit the ground from a fatal height, his royal blood spilling onto the same streets where thousands of commoners had bled during the war his family started. There is a grim poetry in that, a leveling reminder that gravity does not care about bloodlines, and impact trauma is democratically distributed regardless of whether your grandmother rode the dragon that conquered Westeros. But Joffrey's death was merely the opening act of this horror show. The main event was what happened to Syrax, and this is where things get truly disturbing. The mob swarmed the Golden Dragon like a living wave of human fury. Syrax breathed fire, incinerating dozens, maybe hundreds of attackers in seconds. The dragon clawed and bit and fought with all the savage instinct that millions of years of evolution as an apex predator provides. But numbers matter, and for every person Syrax killed, 10 more took their place, driven by hunger, religious fervor, and the collective madness that overtakes crowds when individual identity dissolves into mob mentality. They attacked with spears and axes, aiming for the eyes and the softer scales around the joints and belly. They threw chains and nets to try to entangle the wings. They set fires not to scare the dragon, but to confuse and disorient it. Syrax, trapped in the confined space of the dragon pit's ruins with limited room to maneuver, fought desperately, but was being overwhelmed by sheer numbers and relentless assault. The dragon's roars went from aggressive to panicked to pained as weapons found vulnerable spots, and the accumulated damage began to tell. The end came slowly and horrifically. Syrax, bleeding from countless wounds and exhausted from the sustained combat, finally collapsed. The mob, sensing victory, descended with renewed fury, hacking at the fallen dragon with whatever implements they possessed. They butchered Syrax while the dragon still lived, carving meat from its bones as revenge for every burned building and dead relative. By the time Rhaenyra learned what had happened to her son and her dragon, there was nothing left of either except trauma and the sickening realization that the Targaryen grip on power was far more fragile than anyone had imagined. The storming of the dragon pit killed multiple dragons that night, not just Syrax. The mob went through the structure like a hurricane of human hatred, killing every dragon they could reach. Some of the smaller dragons died quickly. Others fought for hours before being overwhelmed. The dragon pit, which had been built to house and showcase Targaryen power, became a slaughterhouse where that power was systematically dismantled by people who had decided they were done being afraid. The psychological impact of this event cannot be overstated. For over a century, dragons have been the nuclear deterrent that kept the Targaryen dynasty secure. The mere threat of dragon retaliation kept rebellions small and conquests easy. But the storming of the dragon pit proved conclusively that dragons could be killed by determined humans in sufficient numbers. This was not heroes with Valyrian steel or other dragons doing the killing. This was bakers and blacksmiths and beggars with improvised weapons and nothing left to lose. Rhaenyra's response to losing both her son and her dragon was devastating grief mixed with impotent rage. She could not retaliate against the small folk without confirming everything the shepherd had preached about Targaryen cruelty. She could not ignore the attack without appearing weak. The Dance of the Dragons was already a catastrophe, but the storming of the dragon pit transformed it into something even darker, a preview of how Targaryen rule would eventually end generations later when Robert Baratheon led another rebellion of people who had stopped being afraid. The death of Jeffrey Velaryon and the end of Syrax marked a turning point where the dance stopped being about competing claims and started being about simple survival. The Targaryens had lost their aura of invincibility, and once that is gone, it can never be fully reclaimed. Thanks for watching Westeros Throne, and we will catch you in the next one.